Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So my name is Jackie. I'm the event host this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I have the pleasure of introducing our lovely guest, Nancy Crochiere. Just a little bit about Nancy before we get started. She has chronicled the ups and downs of family life, including her obsession with George Clooney, in her humorous newspaper column, The Motherlode. Her essays have appeared in the Boston Globe and Writer's Digest and on WVUR's Cognoscenti blog. In her free time, she acts as an extra in feature films and TV shows. We are thrilled to have her here to discuss her debut novel, Graceland, described as irresistible, addictive, and utterly entertaining. Graceland is a fun, fast-paced, laugh-out-loud, multi-generational road trip that is the kind of book you just don't want to end. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of the event, and if you haven't had a chance to get your copy yet, we do have them available at the registers, and Nancy will be signing them after the event. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you for those quotes from my husband and my mother. I'm used to sitting. I don't know. We'll see how this works. I might actually like this man. And be sure I don't forget anything. I wanted to thank RJ Julia for having me. I think I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna do the whole Bill Donahue. And thank you, Judy, Judy was the one who initially put my book out as a staff pick here. And my new friend Donna took a picture of it, the lovely stack, and sent it to me, and that's what started this whole situation, this whole get together. So thank you all. Thank you, Jackie, for being here, and Julie, who's not here, for arranging it all. I wanted to give a shout out to my good friend Rona Robin, who is here with her husband. Rona was my manager at McGraw-Hill for many years. That was where we worked in college textbook publishing. And she came all the way from Fairfield with her husband, Alan, to be here tonight. You'll notice that if you read the book, or if you've read the book, Fairfield does appear in the book. It's someplace that I needed my characters to stop someplace, and I thought, oh, that's someplace I know. I'm going to just to give you an agenda for what we're gonna do here. We'll talk for about, I'll talk, you listen, about 15 or 20 minutes about the book and my writing journey, and then I'm gonna do a really brief reading, and then there's a Q&A, and so I hope you will all be thinking of questions in the meantime, because if you don't ask questions, then I have to ask questions of myself, and I tend to really lob a lot of softballs at myself. You know, I'll say things like, "Oh, Nancy, how did you think of that brilliant interweaving of the three narrators on this road trip?" And you don't want to hear my questions. So better that you come up with your own. For anybody who doesn't know anything about Graceland, my novel, it is the story of a single mom who is forced to chase her Elvis-obsessed mother and her pink-haired teenage daughter to Memphis to stop them from revealing a secret, basically. So that's what we call the elevator pitch, which some of you know. Who else is anybody else a writer? I know Donna's a writer and Kathy is a writer. Any other writers in the room? Oh my goodness, tons of writers. That's great. What do you write?
Just
sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Here.
to be in the spotlight, everything, a little bit of this and that.
Great.
Middle grade.
Middle grade. Have you published any middle
No.
grade? No. Great. I had a good friend who was a middle grade author, so know something about that. So yes, so let's start with who the heck am I? When I talk about my writing journey, I like to start with when I knew I wanted to be a writer. For me, I was 10 years old, and my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Bayevsky, praised a poem that I wrote. And she not only praised it, but she made me turn it into an entire bulletin board. And you have no idea what that means for a little 10-year-old, very, very shy girl with a pixie cut and an overbite. I mean, it was meant everything to me. She said I should be a writer, and it occurred to me that I loved reading, and why not? So that was it. My fate was determined at age 10. So all of you are probably wondering what happened in the 20 years since then. I stole this line yeah, you stop laughing. I stole this line from another writer, but I love it. He said, I recently turned 55. And then more recently turned 65. So yes, it's been a few years more than that. But life gets in the way. Sometimes it did for me, and I worked in college educational publishing, published textbooks, worked as a developmental editor. I raised 2 daughters. Between the two careers, well, they're 2 careers, right? I mean, between the career and the children, I didn't find time to write novels. Some people do, and God bless them. You know, I was not a get up at 5 a.m. or, work till 1 a.m. person, but I did write a lot of short pieces, and that became my column, in local newspapers up in the northeastern Massachusetts area. It was called The Mother Lode, and for those of you who remember Irma Bombeck, or I kind of like to see it as a cross between Irma Bombeck and Dave Barry. Not as well known as either of them, of course, but just family life, struggles with technology, struggles with your husband who likes to use the remote in a way that gave me vertigo, the TV remote, and things like that. And so there were humor columns, and I wrote that for like 13 years. And then I collected some of the favorite columns. I wrote some of the ones that people had said they liked, and that were my own personal favorites. I collected them into a volume called The Mother Lode. That was a friend and I had sort of a little publishing venture that lasted about a year, and we published it. But that was as much as I had done until about 8 years ago, and I decided it was finally time. What happened was my daughters, I had 2 daughters, raised 2 daughters, and they went to college, and a lot of the family life stories that I wrote in the humor column, of course, were based on the family life, the craziness of chasing your children around to soccer practices and piano lessons, and we'd be driving through the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, and I'd be tossing a salad while I was in the drive-through, as we were headed off to a soccer banquet. So when the girls went to college, I felt like I sort of ran out of material. It had been 13 years, and I was tired of picking on Paul, my poor husband, over here hiding in the corner, trying not to be recognized. And I decided now or never, basically. And I told Rona, this is it. I'm leaving McGraw-Hill. I'm going to
Lost.
and she agreed all too quickly. She said, yeah, I understand. Yeah, good. Go ahead. So that was my particular life story publishing journey. I thought, after writing a column for 13 years, writing a humorous novel after writing a humorous column, no problem. You've written 700-word pieces forever and ever. Just string a bunch of them together, and it'll, not that easy, as those of us who are writers, especially novel writers, know. There's a whole wealth of knowledge about novel writing, about character arcs and the narrative arcs, and things that make a novel good as opposed to, and there are some out there where you do feel like somebody just sat down and strung together a bunch of things for, but so it took me about 5 years to write and about 3 years to get an agent, get a publisher, publish it. And so that's where we are today. Let me just see. So one of the things that I like to talk about is one of the things that people ask is where the idea for Graceland came from. And because I'd written about family life, because I'd written about mother-daughter stuff for so long, it was very natural for me when I sat down to write a novel to write about mother-daughter interactions and issues. So that's where it started with Graceland. There's a mother, a daughter, a grandmother. I've been all three at this point, and so I had this idea that the grandmother and the granddaughter were going to bond and go off on some adventure, some caper that the mother was absolutely going to hate. And that was just the start. That was just the initial idea. So the question became, well, what's the destination? And I wanted to be humorous. I sort of fixed on Graceland because there are two different ideas that people tend to hold about Graceland, depending on how big an Elvis fan you are or not. Are there Elvis fans in here? Anybody who's Elvis fan? Have you been to Graceland?
Of course.
Of course.
Married in Las Vegas.
A good friend of mine's son recently did that. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Good for you. Good for you. So yeah, there's two different, approaches to Graceland. If you're not an Elvis fan, you don't quite get it. You go to Graceland, you might think it's kind of campy. If you are an Elvis fan, it can almost be sacred. And so I like the idea of my destination being a little bit of both. It was going to be a little campy and a little sacred. And I also just love the metaphor of Graceland, because I had this idea that all of my characters on their journey were basically searching for self-acceptance, forgiveness, and grace. So that's where Graceland came from. Of course, once you set Graceland as your destination, Elvis insists on being part of it. There's really no way to keep him out. So Elvis does have a role in the story, because the grandmother in the story, Olivia, has been an Elvis fan all her life. She has adored Elvis from the time she was a teenager. And I don't know, is there anybody here who will admit to or still does watch soap operas? No soap opera fans.
I got one.
Good, this is a no judgment zone. Oh, good. I watched them as a child because my grandmother lived with us, and there was a whole afternoon lineup that if I was home from school, if I was sick, or I came home, As the World Turns, Another World, Days of Our Lives, The Doctors. Yeah, and there's some that we didn't watch, because my grandmother must have been like an NBC lady or something, because she, it was we didn't see General Hospital, we didn't see All My Children. There's another one that's big, but anyway. But I knew from soap operas, right? So I had this idea that Olivia, the grandmother in the story, was a washed up soap opera star. And for years she has played the villainess in this soap opera. And as the villainess, of course, you do what villainesses do. You steal husbands, you break up relationships, you cause all manner of trouble. But of course, as soap operas, evolved over, I don't know when this started happening. It was in the 90s, or they started getting a little paranormal, and they started getting a little weird, some of the soap operas. So of course, Olivia Grant, in her 45 years as a soap opera villainess, she not only did the normal villainous stuff, she was dating a drug head of a drug cartel, and she was kidnapped by pirates, and she gave birth to an alien baby. You know, she did the whole soap opera gamut, plus some. But Olivia, at the start of the novel, Olivia, her soap's been off the air for several years, and she's thinking about what's next in her life. She's also ailing. Has COPD. She's on oxygen, and she's been basically estranged from her daughter and granddaughter for many years. She's been in California. Her daughter's in Boston. So, for various reasons that I won't go into, the one thing that Olivia wants in her life, wants to do, is to go back to see Graceland one more time. Which is all good, only she needs her daughter Hope to take her. She's, as I said, she's on oxygen. She needs the help to get there, and she wants the help. She wants Hope to take her. Hope, unfortunately, Memphis is the one place that Hope can't go. Hope left Memphis many years ago with a secret and a promise never to return. So she has to say no to her mother. Olivia is not used to hearing no. She has never quite learned the word no, and so she just goes right to Hope's daughter. Hope's pink-haired, activist, impulsive teenager. She's 16 years old. She's just learned to drive. She basically knows how to drive, and she wants Dylan to take her. So I'm going to do a quick reading here of a scene from the book, and put these right here. Let's see. So, of course, when a person of a certain age does a reading, there's certain things that we need. Actually, for the camera, I'm gonna say I stole this joke too, so if Jane Roper is watching this, I stole that from you. And so this is the scene. The book is told for the point of view. I may need the other stuff too, actually. The book is told from the point of view of each of the three women, Olivia, Hope, and Dylan. And this is Hope's narrative. Her mother has just asked if Hope will take her to Graceland. Hope has basically said, no, I can't. And so Hope is going to, she's moving away from her mother's place right now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to tell you to set this up. I don't think so, but we'll see. So Hope is the 40-year-old single mom. As I climbed the steps from the tea station, shading my eyes from the sunlight, I heard quacking. I swiveled toward the public garden, but no, the duck noises were coming from my purse. Dylan had changed the alert for my text messages again. A few weeks earlier, she'd switched my ringtone to a car horn, scaring the crap out of me as I crossed Beacon Street. I took refuge under the awning of a yoga studio to read her text message. It said, "Why won't you take Olivia to Graceland?" I dialed my daughter's cell. "Since when do you call your grandmother Olivia?" I asked. She said grandma made her feel like an old fart. She is an old fart. Well, at least she doesn't act like one. A late bloomer in most respects, my daughter hadn't begun snipping at me in earnest until almost a year ago, around her 16th birthday. That's when it all started. The military clothes, the neon pink hair, and her kamikaze take no prisoners activism. "Where are you?" I asked. In the background, I could hear loud voices and an odd clanging sound. "My question first, why won't you take Olivia to Graceland? She says it's urgent." A motorcycle roared behind me, and I leaned my forehead against the yoga studio's window, shoving a finger in my ear. "Trust me, honey, there's nothing urgent in her desire to see Elvis's microwave. Hold on, Dylan interrupted. Olivia's beeping in. Dylan! My forehead still pressed to the glass, I noticed two women behind the desk of the yoga studio staring at me. I stepped back and for show, tried a deep cleansing breath, but caught an updraft from the subway and gagged. I hurried off down the sidewalk, phone to my ear. Why was my mother calling Dylan? For years, she and my daughter had ignored one another. My mother had visited maybe 4 times since Dylan was born, and only then if she was traveling to New York for an audition. Dylan had grown up seeing her grandmother on Viagra commercials more often than in person. After my mother's move to Boston, I'd begged Dylan to spend time with her grandmother. This past weekend, I'd finally wrestled my shame to the ground and bribed her. Dylan had pocketed the 20, but as soon as we got to my mother's apartment, I wondered what in God's name I'd been thinking. My mother took one look at Dylan's hot pink hair and quipped, "What's with the clown hair?" Her eyes trained on her grandmother's white updo. Dylan had shot back, "What's with the Q-tip?" At some point that afternoon, though, the two of them had bonded. I'd left them alone while I picked up our Indian takeout, and when I returned, neither of them even looked in my direction. I had the odd sense that the teams had realigned and I hadn't been chosen by either side. Dylan's voice on my cell brought me back to the present. "Sorry," she said. "Where were we?" "Can't recall," I lied, pressing the crosswalk button too many times. "I think I may have dialed you by mistake." "Oh yeah, Graceland. Olivia said this was like her dying request. She's not dying, is she?" "Of course not. Your grandmother loves hyperbole." "That fake lettuce?" I made a mental note to get my daughter tutoring before the SAT. "Dylan, bottom line, a trip to Memphis isn't possible right now." "What do you have against Memphis anyways? You lived there half your life, but you won't even talk about it." I stopped walking. "What? If I ask you anything about Memphis, you make this face like I asked about your last gynecologist appointment or something." Did I? This was news to me. Through the phone, I again heard yelling and that same clanging sound. "What's that noise?" I asked. "Why are people shouting?" The pause was so long, I thought I'd lost her. Finally, Dylan gave a long exhale. "You won't like it." "I already don't like it." "We're protesting." "Dylan, no." I yanked my hair. It was a bad habit. There's a little description here. I'm gonna just skip over it. It's how Dylan and her Gender Sexuality Alliance are protesting, and they're protesting a bakery that won't make a wedding cake for a gay couple. And now Dylan has already been in trouble because she has slashed the tires of a kid at school, a homophobic student who was making picking on social media on her friend and her girlfriend. So now Dylan had a suspension on her record, not to mention a court date. When I reminded Dylan of that, she cut me off. "Mom, this protest is nonviolent. We'll be fine." "Please," I begged, "just don't do anything foolish." "I can't possibly," she yelled. "I'm chained to a bike rack." So, that is Dylan. I'll take off my head here. And Hope and Olivia. Let's see what else. So basically, Olivia wrangles her granddaughter into taking her to Memphis, and once they take off together, Hope has no choice but to follow them because only she understands the danger to their family of revealing basically the secret, which as you won't. It won't take you long in the book to learn that the secret has to do with Dylan's father, basically. So that is the basic plot line. It's Graceland is meant to be fast paced and fun. And, but I was an English major. I have a master's degree in English. Cheers for English majors. So, I wanted to write a book that was humorous, but I also wanted to include serious issues, serious themes. There are symbols, there are imagery, in the book, there is imagery. One of the themes that, was central to me in writing the book is it's a book about identity. And all the characters are sort of struggling on their road to Memphis with this idea of identity, of being who they should be, who they are versus who they feel others want them to be. And that's Hope's struggle, just as an example, because she's always Hope's been an introvert, she's been a people pleaser, and she's never felt able to please her flamboyant soap star mother. So that's that's one of the battles that's being fought, about identity. On the journey, Hope is accompanied by her cousin George, who proudly cross-dresses as Jordan. And the reason that I liked that combination was because Jordan has been through this in her life. She's been through this battle with identity and come out on the other side, and is very happy with who she is. And so she's in a unique position to be a foil to Hope on this trip, and to say, and to push her, to say, you're telling a lot of lies, you're keeping a lot of secrets, you're not being who you truly are. So that's one theme. Yeah, I've been very honored in the recent months since the book was published. It was called one of the best novels of summer by Parade magazine, and one of the best novels of spring by BookBub. It was chosen as a book club pick by Pop Sugar. It's an organization I had never heard of before, but now I know all about them. And also by on TikTok. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the TV show Young Sheldon. So yeah, spin-off of the Big Bang Theory. Reagan rewarded the 15-year-old girl who plays the twin sister of the main character, has a book group on TikTok. She's a voracious reader. She's 15, but she's very, very mature. And she came, her family had come from Memphis originally, I guess. And so she picked Graceland as their book club pick in July. Yeah. So, yes, it was also listed as one of the best books. I like to joke about this, by best books of the summer by Deep South magazine. And I keep joking that I expect any minute to be banned in the Deep South. Yeah. So far, so good. We're off to the Louisiana Book Festival in the end of October. We'll see what happens there. It's all interesting. So yeah, I'm going to open the floor to questions. Hopefully you've all been thinking of something you're deeply invested in knowing.
So I'm wondering a little about your process and your sort of development of the characters. Did you just kind of come up with these characters and then dive in, or did you have the plot all mapped out? And I'd just like to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think for me the characters did come first. Definitely the dynamic between Hope and her mother sort of came first. People ask, which is the character that I am most like, or most invested stuff of myself in. And I think as a writer, you probably invest a little bit of yourself in each of them in very different ways. Olivia is a very organized plotter, and that's me. But Hope was the introvert and the people pleaser, and that sort of came from my background. And then Olivia just, sort of came, just full blown out of nowhere. I don't know. She just appeared, and she always knew what she was going to do. It was almost like she was, I put her in a situation and I knew exactly what she was going to say. She was always outrageous. It was always what you didn't expect. But, the one I had the most trouble with was of the three was Dylan, the 16-year-old. and I was taking a lot for a long time out of my daughters, and including what I thought was kind of hip slang. It turns out, my daughters are 30 in their early 30s now, and so what I thought was kind of hip slang was, I had to actually hire the daughter of a friend of a fellow writer who was able to clue me in to some of the current slang and also cultural references. Well, Dylan wouldn't think about this, she would think about that, person or that. Yeah, so anyway, it's a long answer to your question. I don't know. Yeah.
Did your daughters read the book before you as you were writing it, or?
Neither of them as I was writing it, interestingly enough. I had my younger daughter was in a PhD program, and she had less than no time. My older daughter spent a little bit more at a remove of everything that I've written, but she did listen to the book on audiobook recently, and she told me that she enjoyed it. She had some quibbles about the ending, but that's good. If that was her biggest quibble, it's all good. I think she wanted, I think she likes romance novel, and not romance novels, but she wanted everything, tied up. I'm sort of against tying everything up too neatly. I like hopeful endings. I don't like, I'm not against a happy ending, but I just I prefer a hopeful ending, and that's what I felt like I was writing toward. All right, who else? Rana.
So how did you know when you were finished? Because I know how hard you worked on the book over a period of years. So how did you know it's okay? This is it.
Yeah, good question. Is it? Do I feel like it's finished? I mean, I keep changing it every time I read from it. Yeah, I think I finally got to a point where I felt like it was as good as I could make it. And I don't know how many of you know about the process to get your book published these days. The first thing you need is, if you want a big publisher or even a medium publisher, you need an agent. And that's the hard part. That's the gatekeeper. They're the sometimes getting a publisher comes very easily, as it did to me after that. But that was the agent, that was the gatekeeper. And so I started querying agents, which is what you do. You send them, I don't know, you send them 20 pages and a 1-page letter, and you ask them to represent you. And I started querying in February of 2020, which if that doesn't ring, light off bad. So I spent 8 months, I think, querying, and people would ask for the whole manuscript and they would always like it, but it's maybe not, not exactly what I represent, or maybe I do like these characters, I'm not sure I know how to market it, things like that. And so I was very discouraged at the end of that period. But I read the book over again. I was trying to decide whether to put it in a drawer or whether to continue. And I decided that I liked it. And that was a crucial thing for me. It's no, I think there's something here. I really like it. So I hired a developmental editor, the same person that Donna has worked with, and I cut out 20,000 words. Ouch. And when I was done with that process, it was definitely ready to go. And I think better for that. In truth, even after it was accepted by an agent, the agent asked for some changes. When it's accepted by the publisher asked for some changes. So when I thought I was done, I knew I wasn't really done. But now I am mostly. Anyone else?
Never really finished.
No, honestly, yeah. I mean, like I said, I've heard this from other authors too. You're doing readings and you're like, oh, I can do that part better. If you're like an editor, that was my training. So editing is it's my background. Anyone else?
Are you happy with your setting in Memphis, or as you wrote it, or, I mean, I don't know how many times you've been to Memphis. I don't know why you picked Memphis, but.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because I picked Graceland, then I suddenly had to go, of course, to Memphis and to Graceland. I've been to Graceland twice now. And I was to Memphis 3 times, including doing the road trip to Memphis to make sure everything was right. So, yeah, Memphis is a mixed bag, certainly. I like it, and there are a lot of things there that, besides Graceland, there's a Civil Rights Museum there that's fabulous. It has its own sort of grittiness and vibrancy that I really like. That said, I feel like it's fallen on some hard times. I felt like there's a lot of crime in Memphis, and I felt like it was beginning to sort of pull itself up, and then the pandemic hit, and I think it sort of had a little setback. But did that answer your question? Not really. I guess.
Well, no, I guess I would have thought you had been there more, and that was a special place to you. But I understand, your choice of the title, and that
Mhm.
seems to fit well with what your ideas were. And
Before I started writing, you hear people talk about, you should write what you know. And I heard this guy talk, just before I started writing this, and he was like, you should write what you don't know. Because that's more fun, right? I mean, that's like an adventure. So I feel like I did a little bit of both. I wrote what I knew, the mother-daughter relationships, the heart of that stuff. What I didn't know was the setting piece. And that was fun for me to explore. And I've told some people about the research that I did in Memphis, because I was a little obsessed with getting everything right. I had just this fear of being in a group like this and having somebody say, well, you can't turn left out of the Peabody Hotel
Right.
and get beyond BB King Boulevard. You've got, and so I was just concerned about getting everything just so. So I ended up talking my way into a lot of places in Memphis just to be sure that I was getting it right. One of the places I tried to talk myself into was a jail cell. Yeah, there's a big police sheriff court facility called 201 Poplar in Memphis. That's in the downtown area. And you go in and you go through the scanners and like an airport, but they let me in. And so I finally cornered a police officer, and I was asking him, I was trying to say I'm a writer and I have these questions. If somebody was arrested at the Peabody Hotel, where would they take that person? And he was like, well, where's your friend now? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm a writer. And then, well, what did he do? And I was like, he absolutely did not. He was not buying the writer story for one. And he finally seemed to warm to it after a while, and but he wouldn't let me in a jail cell. He described it. That was as close as I could get.
send him a book.
Yeah, now that would, if I had, actually written down his name or something. I did talk to a guy at one of the better Memphis libraries, a historian there, that helped me with some of the background. Here's where Hope's family would have lived, and this is what Hope would have, been familiar with downtown, and this is how things have changed in 20 years and that sort of thing. Anything else? Everybody's good? Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you. I hope that you'll support RJ Julia in whatever way possible, even if you have the book, maybe there's something else you can buy. And if you do buy the book, I'm happy to sign it for you. I was talking to my friends earlier and saying that, nobody really seems to know what makes a book take off these days, what it is that just, and the best I can figure out, a lot of it's word of mouth. So if you read Graceland and you like it, and if you would just tell somebody else about it, And if you read it and you don't like it, just silence is the better part. But I appreciate it. I appreciate all word of mouth, all Amazon ratings, even if you don't buy it at Amazon, and I hope you don't. You can still rate it there, and that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.